The next day, John was there again with 2 of his disciples. When he saw Jesus passing by, he said, "Look, the Lamb of God." When the 2 disciples heard him say this, they followed Jesus. Turning around, Jesus saw them following and asked, "What do you want?" They said, "Rabbi, where are you staying?" "Come," he replied, "and you will see." So they went and saw where he was staying, and they spent that day with him. Over the past 2 to 3 years, I have found my head turned and my heart caught by the transformative glimpse of God I have experienced through Christian community. Like the 2 disciples, I have felt this glimpse feed a deeper curiosity, prompting me to follow and ultimately be invited to come and see. To this end, this 2023, I am embarking on a 6-month journey to dwell with various Christian communities. On the way, I'll be sharing interviews with community members, founders, and leaders to learn more about the blessings, challenges, and wisdom these dwelling places of God hold. In doing so, I hope to inform how it is we might nurture people and communities to be transformative manifestations of God, offering a glimpse of the divine and inviting people to come and see God's loving dwelling place.
My name is Richard Carter. I'm from St Martin in the Fields. I'm the Associate Vicar for Mission, which means the outreach programme for the church here, especially working on the formation programs, the lecture programs in the autumn, the Lent programs, but also having a special responsibility for our outreach to people who are refugees, asylum seekers, and those who are homeless. So a lot of the pastoral care of the church here. And I'm the leader and also the founder of the Nazareth Community. Yeah. Which is flourishing at the moment. Long may it last.
Oh, that's excellent, because how long has it been going for?
It's been going for, this is its 5th year, and we have what we call the Nazareth Community, who are those who are in easy distance of St Martin in the Fields, so they can gather here for the services. But over lockdown, we also, because we went online, we got lots of people who became interested. So we have now 140 companions of Nazareth from all over the country and different parts of the world who are following our simple rule of life. And there's about 100 in the community itself. So altogether we're about 240 now, which is...
And would you mind describing what the Nazareth Community is?
Yes.
Yeah, how would you describe it?
Well, we wanted to live a way of life that drew from religious tradition, but also had a simplicity and accessibility and an openness and a relevance to living in the modern world. I thought and I prayed about this a lot, and I began to believe that the monastic life, or the lessons of monastic life and the lessons of the simple discipleship of the Gospels was really, really important in the centre of the city. So basically I started trying to work out a rule of life by which we could live by. But I don't think you can sort of sit down and write a rule of life. I think the only way to come to a rule of life is to pray it. That's what Brother Revd said. You pray a rule of life into being. So with a group of about 8 or 9 of us, we decided just to start praying, and we began the rule of life with the contemplation. Contemplation, which Rowan Williams says is a revolutionary activity. Some people think of contemplation as something which is sort of passive, but it's the time where we begin really listening listening to God, listening to one another, and listening to the world around us. So we began with this period of Lent where every day we met early in the morning for an hour of silent prayer. And after Lent was over, everyone who took part said they'd like to continue. But every day was a bit too exhausting because we were meeting at 7 in the morning. So we began to meet 7 in the morning, but twice a week and once in the evening. So 3 hours a week for just simple contemplation, listening, stilling ourselves, becoming more centered. And from that first simple rule, silence, we began to devise the other parts of the community. And one of the parts of the community, each one began with S, so we call it the 7 S's. And the second S was service, because we don't believe that contemplation and action are separate camps. We believe that the more you contemplate, the more you become inspired to want to know more about others, and the more compassionate you become. So in other words, contemplation opens up your heart and soul, and then when your soul and heart is opened, you become more aware and attentive to those around you. So in a centre of London, on the edge of Trafalgar Square here, one of the huge areas of need was people who are foreign nationals, as you probably realise, coming into London, many of them struggling with getting the right papers or not having the proper status, not being able to work, many of them homeless, many of them facing destitution. We'd already been doing a lot of work with homeless people, but for 12 years I've been running this group called the International Group, which is particularly focused on helping those with no recourse to public funds, those who are asylum seekers, refugees, migrants from different parts of the world facing destitution in London. And so we began to work closely with them, build community with them, opening up on Sundays to do washing, showers, laundry facilities, hot food. And we've kept that going all the way through lockdown. So the second S, there you are, is service. The third S was that our community needed to be anchored in Scripture, and our method of approaching Scripture was Lectio Divina. We already had a group on Wednesdays that met for Lectio, in which we saw the Scriptures being fulfilled in different people's lives. So we've focused on that and also enhancing that and developing that, so that each Wednesday evening we have these Lectio groups, both here at St. Martin's, but now for our companions online as well through group facilitation. So silence, service, Scripture, and our fourth S was sacrament. The Eucharist celebrated where hopefully the community could gather, and we chose our point of gathering a Wednesday evening for a service of Bread for the World, where people gather, and it's a kind of informal Eucharist where we gather around the altar. People can join that by watching online. But the idea really is that we are all sacramental, our lives are sacramental, and as members of the community, we are called to be the bearers of Christ to others and to discover Christ in the lives of others. So that idea of sacrament, not just as a piece of bread, but on the way we live our lives and the way we interact with others. Then our fifth S, we began to realize that as a community we needed to learn more about the lives of each other. So once a month we meet together for shared silence, a Saturday morning shared silence, then shared, how should we say, teaching, and then groups and breakfast together and sharing food. So it's called sharing, Nazareth sharing, and that takes place once a month, and also for retreat days during the year. So that was the fifth S. The sixth S is we believed that in London one of the greatest poverties is that people have no time, and that everyone is always rushed, and that everyone is always 1,000 things to do, and they're trying to multitask, and in many ways those distractions become all-consuming. So we believed in our community there must be some way of finding a rule of life that actually slows us down, and we called our 6th S Sabbath time, trying to find time where we replenish our spirits or our souls. And different people replenish their spirit in different ways. Could be by going for a walk, it could be by listening to music, it could be by going to the theatre. I love the theatre. It could be by poetry, it could be by art galleries, which are all free in London, or visiting someone you love, or making time in your diary for those things which in your life are life-giving, and not feeling as if that rest time is how should we say, a privilege, but is actually essential to our lives. So it's bringing in Sabbath time to become a central part, so that we don't just rest in order to work harder, but we work in order to find that place of rest and replenishment and God and thankfulness. And then our 7th S of the 7 S's of Nazareth was staying with. It's based on the Benedictine vow of stability, that you kind of have to try and discover a rhythm whereby your life has a deeper rhythm and a stability and a staying with. So it's not just something you do for a few weeks and then drop out of, but you're trying to find a way of living that is conducive to the way all the responsibilities that you have in your life that can actually fit in, but is not just sort of something you do on the edge, but something at the very center that gives life to everything else that you do. So that staying with really is about trying to find a kind of a rhythm where you don't overburden yourself, but at the same time you have a discipline that's strict enough to help you. So that's the 7 S's of the Nazareth Community. It's a really simple rule. We also wanted a community that was not exclusive, because we're a part of a church with an open door. So we don't want a community that just belongs to some and not to others. So we said that anyone is welcome to join any of those elements. If you're someone who feels you need silent prayer and you don't belong to the Nazareth Community, come and join us for silent prayer. If you want to join the Lectio for the scripture, come and join us. If you want to help serve with an act of working with our refugee group, volunteer or do your own acts of service. But the only one of the 7 rules which is just for Nazareth is the sharing, where we do every Saturday, and that's our own community time, where we spend time with each other, and we need to give space to each other. But everything else is open to others if they want to join us. But it's been a good journey, because when people think of a rule of life, they kind of worry, especially in the West. They think they're going to let themselves down and let other people down. But I kept on seeing this way of life not as a kind of onerous augury, but a kind of way of living that actually centers you and sets you free. It actually allows you to live more fully, not feel more guilty about not keeping up with the rule. So it's very flexible. If someone can't join us for the morning prayer, for the silence, well then it's up to them to fit it into their schedule. We're not kind of there to discipline people. We're there to offer them a rule which is an obedience, which sets us free.
Yeah, wow, beautiful. And so are members of the community from the parish, and is there a kind of, do people take like promises for a year? Is there like a commissioning?
Yes. We it's not just for we want this to be a resource to anyone who is seeking a deeper relationship with with Christ, but we don't want to pull people away from their own communities. So right from the beginning, Nazareth was a way of helping people deepen their faith, but not pulling them away or taking sheep from people who are already part of communities. So that if you belong to a different parish, you can still be part of Nazareth. Or if you are on the edges of religion and you feel that you don't yet belong, maybe Nazareth is the way that you can find a deeper belonging. And if you are someone struggling, so I believe that the community should be as open as possible to people who wanted to join, rather than put up loads of fences around it. And it has been my experience that those who one would think are possibly those who come to the community with the greatest needs are often the ones who've been able to share the best. So we have people in our community who are homeless. We have people with mental health problems or with facing disabilities in their lives. Some of our companions are housebound, so we are able to reach them and for them to live the rule of life from their own homes through the wonders of internet. And I think that's constantly centered the community, because if you have someone sitting next to you who spent the night on the street, you can't be too up yourself. You know what I mean? You have to humble yourself. Here's a person who's sharing about a real struggle. It wouldn't be right for you to say, oh yes, and if you read the critique by so-and-so and so-and-so, or if you read sort of some Bible commentary. I think it's made everyone more humble and more ready to be open about their own faith and their own journey and their own struggles. So our aim is to be a bottom-up community, a seed that falls on the ground and dies, rather than a sort of hierarchy that...
And how, because it's 5 years old, how is it that people heard about the community or felt invited to the community?
Well, I believe that, that what people say is if something is of God, then God will find a way of helping it to grow. We haven't gone out of our way to advertise it, because I think that all communities need times to grow. It's to rush into building a huge empire would be completely wrong. It needs time to be nurtured, to grow, to find its own direction. It needs intuition and care and love for a community to begin to flourish. So we haven't kind of been out there sort of proselytizing, oh, join the Nazareth, sending out leaflets telling people to join. But I always love the words of Charles de Foucault, who said something like, when they see the servant, they will long for the master. So, in other words, if by the way we're living our lives and our care for one another, people have a glimpse of what Christ is like, then maybe that's an attractive thing. And when lockdown happened and everything changed, I was unable to like everybody, I was unable to do the things that I was used to doing, going into church and leading congregations. So I kind of was allowed out for, like everyone else was, for an hour's walk. And so I began walking in the parks and doing meditations from there, which I streamed. And for some reason, these became very popular, and we've kept them going every week. Every Saturday, we have a live stream meditation on a Saturday morning from 8 till 8:45. And these reached a lot of people because 3,000 or 4,000 people were watching each week, especially popular when everyone else was struggling with that lockdown. So a lot of people became interested through that. I also wrote a book about the community called "The City is My Monastery," which is there's a chapter on each of our rules of life, and that became very popular. I also, each month I write a letter to the community which is based on the kind of life or the way that we've been living each month, and I share that with the community, and that gets shared, and we reflect upon a gospel passage, and we reflect upon some of the ideas from the letter, and again that's been shared. So it's kind of grown quite much faster than we thought it would, but we haven't gone out of our way to try and make it grow, you know what I mean? It's grown of its own volition. And the Nazareth Companions now have their own leader, called Catherine Juice, who she's employed 3 days a week and actually financed by the members of the community in order to gather them and to work with them and to lead that part of the community.
And so from a practical point of view, do people donate to the community to help it run, or is it just coming out of St. Martin in the Fields as a project?
We haven't incurred a lot of costs. I mean, one of the great joys of living simply is that you don't need an awful lot of money to do that. Obviously, there's the resource of time, and St. Martin in the Fields has been very generous to me in that they've encouraged me to lead this. And we are a resource church, St. Martin, so this is one of our ways of resourcing the whole church through trying to live this more committed form of contemplative prayer and discipleship. So they've kind of supported me, as they made this part of my ministry here. And in terms of the events that we do, people give donations. But with the companions, now we have 140 companions. That was getting too big for me to run as well as everything else. So we asked them if they would make donations towards supporting the ministry of someone who is part of the community, who they already knew, whose ministry they valued, and they are now supporting her to be their leader, which is a great thing. So, in answer to your question, we haven't made finance the be-all and end-all, but the longer the community grows, the more generous people have become, and when we have asked, people have been very generous. And also supporting those who can't afford it. So as I said, some of our members are homeless, and some of them are not wage earners or poor or facing poverty or difficulties. So when we have a day, like we're having a day retreat day, which is obviously costs money because we're hiring a place and we're having food together. But then I always say, are you able to pay for a place for yourself? And they can tick that box, and then they say, would you like to request a free place? They can tick that box. Or would you like to donate a place to someone who can't afford to come? Then they can tick that box. So, and we've always managed to cover everyone who wanted to come just by members of the community who've got a little bit more, helping those who are a bit more needy in terms of finances.
Yeah. And how, because now, first question is, so it sounds like you've got morning prayer twice a week? Evening, what does a week look
pattern, like? I mean, I could send you the pattern, but the pattern is Monday morning 7 a.m. till 8 a.m., an hour of silence. Wednesday evening 5 to 6, an hour of silence, then 6:30 to 7:30, our informal Eucharist followed by Lectio Divina. And then Thursday morning 7 till 8, and Saturday morning 8 till 9, the walking meditation. So and then one Saturday a month they're sharing the gathering.
Yeah, it's really interesting in finding out how community can be compatible with a variety of different lifestyles and how it can be compatible with work, full-time work, and also other.
So far it seems to be working really well. There are obviously other people. There are people who can engage with everything. There are people who can't do the early mornings because they've got children or they've got to get off to work or they've got other things. But then they find another time to keep their time of silence. But you can join, and most people do, join the silence from home. So we turn on the camera in church, but most of the community members just join online so that they keep the silence together, because that actually, the keeping of the contemplative prayer together strengthens the whole community.
And do you feel this kind of model of doing community and church-linked community is something which can easily be taken up by different parishes, smaller parishes?
It needs commitment and it needs time. I mean, if someone said, what is the most important thing about starting a community? It's constancy. It's actually being there. It's actually turning up, and actually believing that God will enable what you have started. And it can't be a lot of our modern life is about kind of marketing something off, sort of setting up a course and leaving it for people to get on with, or doing a program and then that's it. But community is very different. It doesn't work with that's it. It actually works much more on a rhythm for life, where you have to keep on turning up even when you'd rather do something else or stay in bed or have a day off. It's just that constant turning up. So that's one of the struggles. One of the blessings is that if you do turn up, and if you create that rhythm and that sense of community, then it becomes life-giving. It centers you in lives that I think modern living is quite out of kilter. I think there's a lot of people who are actually frazzled with life, and they're anxious about starting anything else because they think, oh, no good, I fail at something else as well. But this is quite opposite to this. It's not saying we want you to do more. It's actually saying we want you to do less. We want you to create a period of space in your life where you're not answering 100 emails, where you're stilling your mind, where you're actually coming together, where you're replenishing your spirit. And actually, there is a huge desire for that. That's why if you go into the park, you'll find so many people running. Why are people running? They don't all want to be marathon runners, or they don't want all to be, win the London Marathon, although some of them do. But a lot of people are running because they're needing space. They're needing to get out of their routine, humdrum life, and they need to run through the park, let off steam, let go of the tensions. A lot of people are doing mindfulness and ask me things like, oh, do you do mindfulness in the Christian church? I said, yeah, the Christian church is incredibly mindful. It's mindful of Christ, it's mindful of creation, it's mindful of humanity. It couldn't be more mindful, and yet some people think that this is a separate occupation to do mindfulness, Or, there's the wonderful traditions around us, which we learn from other traditions, like the Islamic call to prayer 5 times a day. Muslims are also very productive people. They are people who work extremely hard, and many Muslims are helping to run this country, many parts of this nation. And yet many of them are also doing that as well as praying at least 3, possibly 5 times a day. Now, they're an incredible inspiration to me and an example to me. If, you say you don't have enough time to pray. Well, how come the whole of the Muslim community can make time to pray? Or Buddhism. People often talk, oh, it's wonderful, I went on the most wonderful Buddhist retreat. Well, Buddhism has a lot to teach us about slowing down, about actually being attentive again, restoring that sense of a life which is centered. And those meditation techniques, they're very grounded in Christian tradition as well, with the early fathers of our church and people like St. Augustine. Our hearts are restless until we rest in God. The desert fathers and mothers who came away from the busyness of the city in order to find stillness, and then became the source of wisdom, and returned to the city in order to often provide that wisdom. So the Christian tradition has a great deal to offer in these areas of stillness.
I have 2 more questions because I'm aware that you've got a service to preside. One is very practical. Can you remind me the number of in-person community members at the moment?
About 100.
Oh wow! Yeah. And so there's 100 people. Well, some of them will join from home, but you've got a good chunk of 100 meeting for Lectio.
100 around here, and 140 companions. So we don't want to see it as us and them. It's one community. So it's sort of members. 240. I have to be honest, not all of those are active. I saw someone yesterday who's had a baby and, caught up with all of those things and came up to me and said, oh, I'm so sorry I haven't been for the last few months, So we don't have, it would be lovely to think you had 240 people who are participating in the whole thing, but we have a good number who are participating, and a good number who participate when they can and with the love and availability that they have.
And how do you feel that, for example, I'm thinking about the sharing Saturdays that you were talking about, and say a good chunk of people attending those, and how big was the community when it started, and is there a difference in level of connection between people as it's grown?
Yeah, I think people mostly, there's always the desire to know each other more. But the Church of England and churches are quite good at social activities. We're quite good at meeting for coffee and nattering and that kind of thing. But we're less good at being present to one another, of being really present and being really listening to one another. And so there's a difference, I think. What I notice about the Nazareth community is that they are more present to each other. They listen to each other, that every voice matters. And for example, we have a WhatsApp group, and when it started, it was full of chit-chat, like, oh, what are you doing? Oh, I'm doing... And I thought, that, with 100 members, that's going to be hopeless, because basically it will just make everybody busy with other people's busyness. So how can we create a WhatsApp group that is life-giving rather than just sort of another thing that you don't have time to read? So we kind of suggested that the WhatsApp group should be a place of praying for one another and supporting one another. So, today one of our members has an asylum case in the courts here. So, someone put up, please pray for this man for his case. And there's about 30 or 40 messages saying, I'm praying for you, I'll be with you in prayer, I'll be thinking of you, And it's a real, it's like a whole safety net of support, of prayerful support. So what I'm saying is that the sharing is very important, but I don't think we all need to be sort of sharing every aspect of our life. We're actually coming together to share a path rather than just share gossip or tittle-tattle. Not that people just want to gossip, but it's more than just being social. It's actually a deeper listening to one another. Does that make sense?
It does. And have have you had, when, for example, you meet for lectures or something, in which you have to break out into groups now, because it's quite a big number? So that's, yeah. And are they the same groups each time?
No, we have different groups. I mean, we had a Nazareth sharing last Saturday, and I said there's 100 members of the community, and 45 came for the sharing. But to be honest, you know, that's every month, and if you get 45 each month on a Saturday, which is giving a big time commitment, you know, and people are busy with holidays, programs, children, you know, activities, visits, you know, going to see the relatives. So half the community almost coming for a Saturday sharing. I'm very happy with that. And I don't want it to be a community where people feel guilty. The Western world is full of people feeling guilty that they're not performing. And this community is not about performance. It's about something which is life-giving and life-nurturing.
And have there been any challenges in having kind of nurtured this community, or do you feel like?
So far, it's been a real blessing. I haven't found it a heavy burden. I found it life-giving myself. I mean, if you said what are the anxieties of the community, like all communities, you worry about members, you worry about some of the things that people are going through. You know, members of the community, when you begin to listen to them and listen deeply, everyone is carrying their own wounds and their own pain, and you get to know a community, you begin to become more attentive to the pain that people carry in their lives, you know, the bereavements, the illnesses, the worries, the past struggles. So all those things are part of our common life together. In terms of the future, if I thought about the future, I kind of have those kind of worries like, what will happen next? Who will look after this? What will happen if, you know, so-and-so wasn't here? But that's part of any life. You know, if you've trusted God to bring you this far, you kind of have to trust God to carry it on in God's way, you know. What I've tried to get away from, and this sounds maybe a bit amusing, but I've tried to get away from religion led by committees. Because I think sometimes when we go into our head structural, strategic mode, we lose that sense of that it is God who guides us. At the same time, if we just go all airy-fairy and say, oh, let's just sort of do our own thing, that's no good either. What I learned was from my life in religious community, and I was a member of the Melanesian Brotherhood, is that you create simple rules of life. And the rules of life are like the trellis of the community. And like a trellis in the garden, a trellis helps the community to grow, but it doesn't confine the community or try and contain the community. The trellis is there to help the community to grow bigger than the trellis. And that's what I have tried. That's the image I've liked to think of for Nazareth, that we've created rules of life which are flexible enough to accommodate the divergence of the community and the diversity of the community, but also rigorous enough to provide the structure to help us grow. Does that make sense? But not to sort of have endless meetings. You know, when we come, let's begin with an hour of prayer. Let's not begin with, you know, discussing sort of when we're going to have the next meeting.
Indeed. And my final question, I've called this podcast Dwelling Place in reference to Psalm 84.
Yeah.
And thinking of, obviously God dwells everywhere, but kind of thinking about community as a dwelling place for God as well. And so I would want to ask, where is it that you felt God dwelling particularly significantly for you in this community?
I have to say, this community is for everybody, but for me personally, it began with the realization that I lived in the city, and that often we think of, like take a retreat, go out of the city, find the country, find the quiet place, find the oasis, find the place of peace outside the city. But the more I thought about that, the more I prayed about that, the more I realized that my own particular calling, this is not for everybody, but my own particular calling was the calling to actually find the desert in the middle of the city, to actually find that place of oasis, that refreshment, that nourishment, right in the heart of a busy and demanding life. And that's been the challenge for me, but also I think it's been the great strength of Nazareth, that we are actually not trying to run away from the world, but actually for our worlds, which are often unreal, to find a greater reality at the center of all that we are, the still center, the center that gives life to everything else that we do. I also think that the community is a generous space. And I know that in other communities that I've sometimes been to, they are much more focused on, their difference from everybody else. Whereas I think that our community has deliberately, because of the way it was founded, focused on trying to include and trying to realize that the greatest treasure is often from the places where sometimes the person has been overlooked and not heard. So certainly I feel that what has grounded this community is the voices of people who are refugees, the voices of people who are maybe struggling with their lives, facing difficulties, facing grief, facing mental health problems. And they have a profound closeness to the gospel that I think has been life-giving to the rest. And I always say, I was just about to say the rest of us, which would assume that I'm in one category and they're in another category. I think one of the chapters of my book says the me becomes us. In good community, I believe it's no longer an us and them. We all begin to realize that it's our, struggles and our difficulties and our woundedness and our grief and our things we got wrong that become the place of our growth. We called it Nazareth because you go down to Nazareth. Jesus went down to Nazareth. It's the hidden place. It's the place where the ego, you let go of the ego in order to become what God wants you to become.
Wow, thank you so much, Richard, for sharing all of that.
Does that make sense? Does it?
It does, and you've articulated things really beautifully, or articulated things which I kind of resonate, which I can feel but wouldn't be able to put into words.